Now we welcome Mr. Dan Perry. He's a former editor-in-chief of Associated Press of Europe and West Asia as well as Africa region. How do you see this further pushing these adversaries too far away instead of closer to negotiations? Do you think that, US can afford to continue these escalation as the midterm approaches?
Yeah, the U.S. obviously can afford many things. Question is whether it's wise, and whether Trump can afford it politically. That's another matter. I am concluding that Trump has concluded that, as against the risk of restarting the war, displeasing the American voters, and harming himself in the midterms, there is a perhaps greater risk of looking completely ridiculous, which is what the Iranians are doing to him with their insistence on basically controlling the Strait of Hormuz and turning it into a toll booth. It's extremely, extremely fascinating. The Americans blundered into this war with a monumental strategic mistake of not having planned for the inevitable blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. So when that happened, they panicked, and Trump signed the capitulation agreement, basically walking away from pretty much all of the war goals, with the exception possibly of getting back the enriched materials from Iran, enriched uranium from Iran. But even that is not assured. And instead of taking yes for an answer, the Iranians are now pushing him on emerging with this a victory in the form of control over the Strait of Hormuz and permanent revenue from it, which is a violation of international law. The reason why I say it's fascinating is because that may be a strategic mistake on par with Trump's own mistake of not having planned for the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. I don't sense that the Iranians understand that the Americans cannot give them this. And if they actually insist on it, not only will they find themselves quite possibly at war with the U.S. once more, and indeed that appears to be happening, but they may also find that one of their advantages in the previous round, which was the dissension among the Western ranks and the tensions between Trump and NATO, which felt aggrieved for having not been consulted, will be replaced with wall-to-wall opposition to what they're doing, and quite possibly a unified Western alliance, conceivably allied not only with the entire Arab world and Israel, but maybe also with Asian countries that are the direct victims of the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, because it is Asian countries mainly that directly get their energy from that quarter. So are the Iranians serious? Are they just negotiating really, really hard and quite possibly very stupidly? Remains to be seen. But Trump may have, at this point, to your question, can he afford it? He may have given up on the midterms, which is why we already see in his speech in recent days him setting up all the excuses with these pathetic explanations about how the elections are going to be fraudulent once more.
Yes, and so Mr. Perry, how do you analyze, or do you see a big difference in epic fury versus this time of escalation, or this time around?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the main difference I see, as I said, is I think this time the West is going to be unified with other countries as well, and also quite possibly this time around it may not directly involve Israel, and Israel's direct involvement was a major aspect of epic fury, which, by the way, some have called blind fury because of this blindness I mentioned to the inevitability of the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz. It's also quite interesting that the Iranians don't appear at present to be very much inclined to draw the Israelis in. They're not firing at Israel. They fired at Aqaba in Jordan, just a mile away from Israel, but they're taking care not to hit Israel, which suggests, or which reflects, a significant development in geopolitics and in regional politics. The Iranians in the past would have been inclined to draw in Israel in hopes of breaking up the alliance against it, because the Arabs might be reluctant to be seen as allied with Israel or even fighting alongside Israel. This time, that no longer applies. If they drew in Israel, that wouldn't really scare away the Arab countries, especially not the Persian Gulf countries. And that maybe is one small ray of light in an otherwise fairly dark and sinister landscape, you see that the Arabs, at least, seem to have gotten over themselves when it comes to hatred of Israel. If only we could say the same for progressives in the Western left.
And Mr. Perry, so how do you analyze how has this Iran war changed overall GCC countries' relationship with Israel as well as Iran? Because Iran claims that Iran claims that they have unified these countries against holding or hosting U.S. bases, versus vice versa.
I wouldn't take anything Iran says in public literally or even necessarily seriously. There is an argument that these countries have been hit and the U.S. hasn't covered itself with glory when it comes to defending these Gulf countries. So I could see where Iran might have some wishful thinking about how they might abandon a Western alliance. And to a degree, it might be true. I mean, some people may feel that way, but the bigger picture, and I think the bottom line, is that the fact that Iran struck with drones and missiles at countries whose business model depends on not being struck by drones and missiles has clarified their thinking and focused their minds on the truth that the Islamic Republic in Iran is their enemy, as indeed it is the enemy of the people of Iran. So I think the Iranians are pushing the envelope a bit too far. They may be overplaying their hand, and that applies not only vis-a-vis the Americans, as I said before, but also to your question, to the Gulf countries.
And looking at Israel and U.S., U.S. continues to funding and supporting Israel. How do you think, how has that affected U.S.'s own reputation and credibility in global affairs?
I don't think the U.S. is going to walk away from its alliance with Israel because of public opinion in the developing world or in Europe or anywhere else. That is a function of U.S. domestic opinion, and as regards U.S. domestic opinion, Israel's behavior in the Gaza war in particular, the mass destruction and significant civilian casualties, and it's the fact that it did it unapologetically and is yet to explain exactly what the strategy was and indeed continues to be, that has harmed it in American public opinion. So the recent polls show that 60% of Americans have a negative view of Israel now. You could argue this is reversible. The Netanyahu government will probably be defenestrated in October. And that might change everything, because if Israel has a moderate government that is again attempting to seek ways to calm the spirits in the West Bank and Gaza and perhaps even pursue peace with the Palestinians in some version of a territorial partition, I think a lot of the hatred of Israel will die down. I think the opposition to Israel's policies, which is causing the shift, because it's people in the middle who shift, not the general haters of or lovers of Israel. I think that may flip, and Israel has a chance to recover, but it depends completely and totally on getting rid of Netanyahu, who is toxic on the global stage and increasingly on the American stage as well, which goes against his brand, because he, with his great eloquence in American English, has sort of sold himself to voters as a person who can guarantee the continuation of the U.S.-Israeli alliance, and right now he's at the source of its crumbling.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perry, for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news.